Are you a fan of our podcast? If so, make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter by searching Trans2 Performance. By following us, you'll have access to exclusive content, special announcements, and more. Join the T2 community today.
Hello and welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Tracy Roberts.
And me, James Cooper.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, Tracy. How are you?
I'm very good.
I'm going to try and slow down today.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're getting overexcited on podcasts again. Get a bit giddy, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
I think we all do, particularly when we get a bit of a breather from being on the road. It's nice to be able to just think about discussion points and actually come in and have a chat, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah.
So, we picked a topic today because I've been spitballing a few things with you based on some of the exec coaching clients I've been seeing, some of the conversations that have come up in print dynamic sessions that we've done. And actually some of the stuff we did at the retreat made us think differently, didn't it? So today we thought we would do a podcast or a hubcast even on the quiet influence, which is increasing the power of introverted leadership.
So, Introversion
in regards to leadership.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it is a really big talking point for me at the moment. Because like I say, I've probably got 60-70% of the people I'm executive coaching at some point have asked me questions or have wanted to focus some of their content and their discussion points around this, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people make some assumptions about people with, high levels of introversion. And one of the biggest things that they kind of consider, particularly when it comes to leadership, is that because they're shy, maybe take themselves out of the limelight a little bit, might seem a little bit awkward from time to time, not want to speak up, maybe a little bit passive in some situations. This would make them terrible leaders.
Now,
I fundamentally disagree.
Yeah, I'm with you, I think. My thing is around, I have understood it at times where leadership, what in my head was, you've got to be the loudest in the room, you've got to be the one with your voice being heard.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember where it actually happened, but I just remember being whispered to.
Oh, okay.
And having that conversation with a mentor at the time, that it wasn't all guns blazing. It wasn't just, you need to do this because you need to listen to me and this is the way it's going to work. It was actually a discussion. And I think it was the first time that from a leadership point of view, I'd seen and then embraced and gone, that's leadership.
It doesn't need volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point, because I think most of us have probably experienced something like that. We've seen both ends of the spectrum and made assumptions because of, the presence of the person, so to speak. And actually, interestingly enough, I read a survey recently from Gallup about this.
Right, okay.
And one of the questions that was in it was something along the lines of, give me some traits and characteristics that you expect of a leader in a high kind of level organization. So the words I wrote down were visionary.
Okay.
So again, gives you that kind of opinion of their presence and their ability to communicate and, rise up, all those things. Character was another word that came up, which was interesting. And also just things like drive and determination, all those things. Those were kind of words that were kind of bandied around a lot in terms of what people assumed someone in a high level position would be. But what was interesting about that was when they then asked people what they needed from a leader, things shifted. So it went from all those, I guess, drive attributes, if you like, those kind of quite heavy leadership words that we kind of associate, to things like trust, compassion, stability, hope, and purpose. So there's a direct disconnect between what we assume someone in a senior leadership role might have in abundance and actually then what we need from them. And I thought that was really interesting.
Well, if you think about trust as a fundamental of Lencioni's principles and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which we obviously embrace as well, do people know what they want? Or do people see what a leader looks like and then actually, hold on a minute, am I getting what what I've been, what I think good leadership is, and then what I actually get, which one's sort of playing off against each other, if you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you ask somebody what they think good leadership is,
what they need,
and what you need from your leaders, there's two totally different things. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what. Well, okay then, if I'm extrovert, do I get the drive, passion, blah, blah, or do I get the whisper, if we like, from somebody that's quite introverted and says, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to not just shout my mouth off.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to have the conversation and speak to people the way that they want to be spoken to.
Yeah, and I think the key fundamental principles here is we're going to look at things from the side of introversion today because it's the topic that we've been discussing. But the truth of the matter is you can make it work on either side, and it is a spectrum, and we're going to talk about that today. Some of the stuff that can be drawback from being very extrovert can be things like dominance. Obviously, that doesn't always lead into high levels of collaboration, overlooking the needs of people because, sometimes you're not as tuned in from an emotional intelligence perspective. You can be quite impulsive. Sometimes that's a really good thing. Sometimes it can be not so good. Probably more at risk of burnout. Probably not reflecting as much maybe and adjusting accordingly. And the last thing I wrote down here was style mismatch, which I think is what you're getting at, which is, if we are fast and furious and we are quite extroverted, can be quite hard to press pause in an authentic way and think, right, I need to adjust myself and take things down a couple of pegs just to be able to communicate effectively with people. But that doesn't mean that all those things can't also be really great things if managed in an extroverted person. If we are managing our dominance in the right way, we are still inclusive of other people, but we're great at making decisions, as an example. If we are, maybe not as good at tuning in on people's needs, are we making it part of our, internal narrative when talking to someone to really dial in to consciously listen? And when we do that, do we get better results as a consequence? Of course. But it's all about being aware, isn't it? Where you sit and how you can dial up, dial down.
Yeah, and I think the impact that has on the people that you're speaking to as well, because obviously if you've got people that are highly tuned into having that discussion and having that, for me to respect you as a leader, I want you to be the person that shows up in that way and gives and speaks to people in a confident, courageous, charismatic.
Yeah.
Really, is that what it always is? Or you talk from your experience as well, Tracy. What was the best leader that you'd had?
I think I've had two very different leaders, and I'm going to lean into the confident one first, more extroverted, that I can think of from a previous role. And what I took from that particular leader was the confidence, the drive, the determination. Also, I think the confidence for me from that particular leader came from, if I wanted something sorting, that person would do it. They'd really support me and get behind me. And I think I leaned into that a little more at that particular time in my career because it was a very fast-paced operational environment. And, if there's a leader there that's got all the answers, of course, you're just going to take their lead and go with it. Yeah. But if I put that same leader into the kind of environment where you've got to really put your time into relationships and, pausing from time to time, maybe that wouldn't have had the same effect on me, if that makes sense. Whereas one introverted leader that I worked with probably in the last sort of 5 years or so really had an effect on me in terms of calm composure. And I think because of the kind of work I was doing that did involve a high degree of being more confident and outgoing, I think from time to time that leader was able to draw us in and let us reflect, give us the guiding principles of what the good stuff around taking time to pause sometimes, thinking about strategy. And the other thing that particular leader was very good at was observing, giving really good feedback. And I don't mean good feedback, I mean good, bad feedback sometimes. Yeah. And also soliciting feedback for themselves. So very, very much in a space where they were able to pause, reflect and think, right, what can I learn from this too? So both in very different environments, both had an impact on me, but there was some definite differences from the leader who was introverted and how they conducted themselves, you know, to I guess, level themselves up in the case of executive presence, if you like, because we do associate executive presence with confidence, generally. Not necessarily, you know, being loud, but just being able to communicate really clearly, you know, quite enjoying maybe public speaking even slightly, that sort of side of things. And that's not always the case, is it?
Yeah, let's take public speaking as an example then, Trace, because sometimes I feel really confident in a public area. So, say, for example, instead of it just being me and you, which I love our conversations, by the way, Tracy Roberts, but I sometimes enjoy like a bigger sort of cohort or bigger number of delegates, and then it means you can bounce ideas off and everybody gets involved, and I seem to just sort of absorb all of that. And then other times, like today, just having a little one-to-one conversation, go into a little bit more depth and understanding that we can get things from that, from not necessarily being that big bravado in front of people. But what about this concept of around confidence and anxiousness then?
Oh, well, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because often people will say I'm introvert or I'm extrovert, but there's a whole spectrum within that. And I think that concept really changed my perception. I know you made some realizations of the retreat, didn't you?
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
I guess why it's important to mention this is you don't have to be fully introverted. There's another way to look at it. So for some people, the introversion is almost like a decompression technique. That's what it is for me. Yeah. So I'm classed as an anxious extrovert, okay, which means that generally in my safe space, which is in work a lot of the time because I'm a subject matter expert, I like to get energy from a room of people, but that's only because I'm adding value, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
It's not because I like to be on stage and be centre stage in any shape or form. It's more about I know I can offer something. So all of my energy comes out there. I have no problem talking to 5 people, 500 people, and I get a lot of energy from it. However, take me out of work. Okay. I am definitely more introverted. I like peace and quiet. I like a small circle of people around me. Have to decompress a little because I put so much into work, if that makes sense. So it would always be seen that I'm the polar opposite out of work. And I'm not in terms of my value system, but my energy definitely is confident in my subject, less confident when it comes to me personally. So that plays a part too. Yeah,
so like social settings and being like in your own company. Now, I for whatever reason, and we was talking about upbringings earlier, but we're not getting into that. I find it really quite interesting that I do get my energy from other people, and having it where I want to be around with, which again, if we look at this from a dynamic as being either an extroverted or introverted, anxious person, or or either, but confident, there's a difference between that and then where maybe you get your energy from. So, for example, do you get your energy back from being by yourself, or do you get your energy back from being around others?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think I get my energy from my extrovert part of my sort of personality, from the value in the energy back from people. So when it comes to the job, I love it when there's a big cohort or I'm in a really deep conversation, exec coach or whatever it might be, and I feel like I'm adding value. I'm getting fed energy at that point, and it's feeding my extrovert nature. But then I get my energy back, like you say, on the other side by decompressing, being quiet, reading, all the stuff that you probably wouldn't assume would be me.
From an extrovert point of view.
Exactly, yeah. So I definitely find, and it made sense to me when I saw that, because I thought I have to be extrovert in a lot of ways to do my job, but I know internally I'm not extrovert. I know that sounds weird.
In your own head.
Yeah, so if we talk about polar extremes, you have a confident extrovert as well, right? Is that what you are?
I'm definitely a confident extrovert. Yeah.
Okay. So...
and been tested, and it's clarified.
So I guess that then, just to sort of help the listeners and the people watching, like the differences between the two, this probably helps them see the introvert extrovert thing slightly differently. Because
definitely did for me, by the way.
So what's the difference between you and me then?
So in the very basic terminology of it is that I'm confident on like outside, expressing outwards, and I don't necessarily need anything back because I've got this full belief that I'm just going to tell you whether you like it or not. But obviously understanding with emotional intelligence and trying to refine that slightly, that's me now being a little bit more conscious around how I show up to other people and making sure I'm delivering the right message, Tracy. Whereas potentially the conversation that happens back from that extrovert or anxious extrovert is where you get the information back that you need to require to validate the way that you think. Whereas
you don't need that. Not so much. I think you need it sometimes.
Sometimes I definitely need that little pat on the back, that little tummy tickle and stuff like that. But most of the time,
you just feed it out there.
I could just go, let's go, let's get out there.
So I'm an anxious extrovert. You're a confident extrovert.
Yeah.
On the other side of the scale, we've got a confident introvert and an anxious introvert.
Yeah. So this is obviously where it starts to
get a bit more interesting.
I think I sometimes wish that I was a little bit more introverted, but if it was that I respect and I listen to the people that are this way, because I'm just not. And sometimes I've even from good leadership where I've had maybe an anxious introvert as a leader, that I've turned around and I've gone, but what did you just say again? Because I'm now intrigued in how they say it and not having to be this big thing. And I'm going, wow, when you speak,
I'm listening.
You know.
You might not talk a lot, but when you do, I want to listen. And I think it's wise to point that out, because this kind of lands on the point we're going to land on today. You know, you can be a confident introvert. So you can be someone who is able to express yourself, you know, within your subject matter expertise or the area that you're comfortable, whatever it might be, in a really great way, and still feel, you know, like it's almost like fake extroversion. It's not, but I suppose the way to look at it would be people might see you as really, really confident and extroverted, even though you're not naturally built like that.
Yeah.
And that's all about the way you communicate, right? And I think that leans back into this whole piece on, do you need to be this extroverted person to be a leader? Well, no, because what we've learned from, you know, the Gallup survey, as well as speaking to countless clients, people want wisdom, and that can fall into either category. You know, sort of a more sort of confident sort of introvert side of things, or an anxious extrovert, or a confident extrovert. But they want trust, compassion, stability, purpose. Well, all of those things can be fed in from an introvert as well. It's just about how we communicate it.
So the delivery, right?
It's mostly delivery, but it's also about that level of self-efficacy and belief that you have, isn't it? So a lot of the way you show up is the stories you tell yourself. So one of the things I often say to people who, you know, I'm speaking to that say they're more introverted is, but are you though? Because a lot of them, they've never sort of seen it in this spectrum, in that sense. No. Are you truly, truly introverted? And if they are, great, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But I also think that they start to believe the hype. And what I mean by that is that, you know, if you're a naturally quiet, calm person and you're more introverted, just naturally, and you know, there's a lot of things that kind of fall into, you know, that category for you, then you start to believe what people say introverts are. So,
saying that you're quite anxious.
Yeah, you're anxious, you're shy, you're, I've wrote down non-assertive, which means that you probably would avoid conflict, you maybe don't want to network, you've got a lack of charisma because you don't jump in and you know, take part in the conversations, you might seem a bit passive, shy. Well, here's the thing, some of those things might be naturally true in some situations, but not all. But then the more that you say that to yourself, the more you start to believe it. So you become more of an introvert.
Yeah.
So I think another way to look at this is where some of that might naturally be you, it's how you can actually expose your authenticity just a little bit differently. So you don't need to, because quite a lot of time when people come to me with this conundrum, they say, look, I am an introvert generally. And what I don't want to do is look inauthentic now. So if I dial up to be extrovert, fully extrovert, I'm going to A, look stupid.
Yeah.
B, I'm going to feel stupid. And C,
you're probably going to go red in the face, Your blood pressure's going to go up a little bit for you, and it's going to look a little bit fun.
Yeah. Fun is a great word, and obviously we're big on understanding yourself, but also embracing authenticity. So if you have got confidence in your areas, it's about how do you help that show up better.
Yeah.
It's not about you automatically, going on a one-day course on how to be loud and proud and, visionary. It's about how can you actually communicate with confidence and clarity, even though your natural way of doing things is to think about things. So quickly, just when we think about this, because I was thinking about this today, obviously the language we use is around print and social styles generally at the moment. You have your thinkers, your ones, your fives, your sixes.
Yeah.
If you've got those numbers in your profile, you're more likely to ponder, maybe have an edge towards introversion a little bit more.
Yeah.
If you've got 3, 7s and 8s, you're a doer. So you're naturally going to be someone who's going to want to jump in and do stuff and maybe not process so much, but you might be a little bit more likely to be quite extroverted with your decision making and your communication. And then your last one is your feelers, which are your 2, 4s and 9s. And they're the ones who probably could slide back into being analytical again and maybe a little bit more introverted because they like to make sure they're doing things that feel good. So, and of course, over at social styles, you've got your analytical and your aimable, which sit across to this side of the grid that basically usually have a little bit more introversion in terms of how they approach things.
Slightly more considered.
Yes.
Would be the word.
Whereas the drivers and the extroverts.
I just hear what I've got to say. Let's get it done.
Yeah. They just want to get stuff done, and they're generally. Now it's not an exact science, but it's a way for us to think how are we naturally wired up, and that definitely feels like it hits me because that explains how I am, because my 8 is very extrovert.
Yeah.
My 2 is very introvert. That's the way I see it. So, just an interesting way of looking at things, because I think it can help you kind of think about what you lead with.
Yeah.
And how it affects you. But I guess what we're trying to land on today is like, what is the power of being more introverted? There's powers to being extroverted and introverted, but what are the powers of being introverted as a leader?
I think from maybe a sporting background, if we start to look at things like the England football team.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we can look at Gareth Southgate on the men's side, we look at Serena Wiegmann on the women's side.
Yeah.
And do you see, well, maybe even the question being, well, Serena Wiegmann, would she be a confident introvert? Would she be the whisper? Would she be the person that is saying the right things and considering everything that she's maybe saying to the players? Same thing for Gareth Southgate on the men's side, is that, okay, not just from a footballing context, but I would consider both of them quite introverted but confident.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think they're really great examples. And the reason I think that's really useful is that a lot of what I've observed over the years with people with levels of introversion, they make good coaches if they're considered, because they observe. And when they observe, they then have time to reflect on how to communicate differently with people. They're able to ask great questions because they're curious, because they want to unpick it as well as help other people. And I think maybe that's the first thing I would land on, is if you're a very, very aware of yourself introvert, you can actually really dial into coaching quite easily if you think about it.
Think about politics.
Oh, yeah.
Go on.
Barack Obama. Yeah, I reckon that's a good example, because he's the kind of person that you see who, yes, he gives a great speech, but it's not Donald Trump's speech. It's not about look at me. It's about the content of what he's saying. He's not the loudest person. Obviously, he's got a huge microphone, that helps. But when you see his connection with other people and his considered nature and, how he's revered by other people, he's definitely kind of more on the introverted side of things, isn't he? As opposed to, Donald Trump as the polar opposite. And I guess that shows you of like using it for good and for bad as well, right?
Talk about the balance right there.
Yeah. But I think it's good to look at that, because it then allows us to think of the separation between the two and the approaches. And of course, if you're a more extroverted person, is it more natural for you to jive with someone who's more extroverted? Well, yeah, but it's also like throwing fire on fire sometimes, and it can be hard to communicate. If you're extroverted and you've got someone who's more introverted, Can that be hard to adjust? Of course it can, and vice versa. But there's always a middle point that you can meet, right?
The next T2 Leadership Retreat will take place on the 7th to the 9th of May 2024. To book your place on the ultimate leadership development experience from the People Performance People, or for more information, please visit www.trans2performance.com.
Going back to your point of what people assume from leadership and what they maybe think that good leadership looks like, but then actually what we need from leaders.
Yeah,
you've got people that, just from the research, saying that, well, we want to see people in that high bracket and having that big, confident, courageous, outspoken person, but then actually we do require that little bit of support, that network underneath. Now, if we just take the examples of what we want and what we actually need, you could be turning around and saying, do we need more introverted leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. In certain situations.
Yeah. Or rather than the extroverted leaders that then come bowling over and tell you the way that you should be feeling.
Yes. You can't feel like that right now.
No, don't feel like that.
No, definitely not. And there is a time and a place for all different types of leadership. We know this. There's more than one leadership style. But what we do talk a lot around at T2 is the chasm. And I think this is a classic example of how this plays out. It's, I guess not always, but over at the assertive side, you're probably going to more likely have people that are more swayed towards extroversion in a lot of instances, more introversion at the other side. But to keep it authentic, I guess for someone who's looking to make influence as a leader, I suppose they've got to think about how they can dial up into that chasm a little bit more. And that's not by being another person and changing their personality. And believe me, I've spoken to so many coaching clients who they've had leaders tell them they need to change.
Yeah.
They've had people say, you
don't be yourself.
Don't be yourself. You must be louder. And they throw them into situations where they're set up to fail sometimes as well. So one great example of that is if you've got someone who's really introverted, why would you throw them into doing huge presentations, etc., really, really quickly? And it's not like that's happened overnight. If you get a senior role all of a sudden, it's not like you've, well, there's a step change. Now you have to do presentations. You've probably had to do it for most of your career. But have you ever had any guidance, support, feedback on how to feel more confident in that situation?
Please revert back to other podcasts and
yes, probably look at that, but I guess the message that I like to land on here is, yes, we looked at like what we expect and what we need. And what we need, a lot of the stuff that's in there links back to introversion. It's about being considered, regulating your emotions more, and actually considering other people's emotions too. But it's also around some of the stuff that people see as a flaw. So for instance, if you are someone who likes to process information and you seem a little bit slower to respond to things, people say you're not going to be a great leader because you need to make quick on-the-spot decisions.
Oh, Tracy.
I know. But here's the thing, sometimes you will. But what you've got to get confident with is that, would it be great if you could have 100% of the information to make that decision? Yes, 100% of the time it would be brilliant. It's not going to happen.
Life happens, by the way.
Life happens. So you've got to teach yourself as someone with, more sway towards the other side, that you've got to trust in your decision making, as in you've got to think, right, even if I don't have 100% of the information, I'm pretty confident with my subject matter expert T's in my system that I can make that decision. And it's something that you've got to test from time to time. Sometimes it's good to kind of start with like low risk projects, if you like, and think, right, I'm just going to throw a caution to the wind here. Sometimes we're not built for that. Sometimes, just seeing what sticks just doesn't feel right. But, it is true that sometimes we are going to have to make tough decisions and think a bit quicker than normal. But we can put ourselves in positions to make us think about, actually, how can we feel more confident in that situation? And a lot of it links back into what you were saying around being confident. If you are confident in your subject, then you should feel more confident making decisions in line with that subject.
I think definitely from a confidence point of view, there will be the flip side of the coin where it could depend on the audience that's in front of you. Yeah. It could depend on the actual individual that's in front of you. Is it maybe one of your stakeholders, for example, where it might be somebody that if the consequence of that fear of failure, if you like,
you're
have an impact on whether you are confident or anxious.
Yes.
And where you sit with that and how that shows up. So I definitely agree with understanding the whole scenario before actually being pushed into those decisions, and maybe managing that a little bit better, but understanding that it is, you are going to show up as yourself, because that's what you should be doing anyway.
Yeah. And you can dial into all those great things, compassion, purpose, all those things, and you can show up really authentically with a coaching style, which is, gonna really help conversations. The other thing I was just going to land on there was the words that I wrote down here was avoid conflict. And a lot of these people that I've been speaking to recently have really made a thing of this, saying, I really do avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Now that would be, probably more towards anxious introvert in some cases.
Can I just make a point on that?
Go on.
When has it ever been a weakness to not care?
I know, it's interesting, isn't it?
When people go, I just care so much about this process or how this is going to land.
Yeah.
When has it ever been a weakness that you care so much about this that it matters to you as an individual and as somebody that you're working with? Because if I'm thinking about it and I'm now being conscious of how I'm speaking and how I come across, if I just dial that down a little bit and then actually you start to listen to me, Tracy, which you're doing now, rather than me just shouting, just see what. But that's in the point.
Yeah, and I think
some people come and say, well, I'm a people pleaser. But we've seen that within the number of the print profiles that you went through earlier. But from a person that just cares about what they do on a daily basis and have done it for a long period of time, at what point does it then go, you know what, they're really good at their job because they care.
Yeah.
Because it means that much to them. They consider everything. They're not the first person that jumps out the gate.
Yeah.
But you know that they're thinking about it. You know that they're having that time in their own head to be able to go, this is what I found from the information that I've been provided, and this is the amount of time. Now, yes, we do agree that you will have to have the amount of time to understand it fully. But going back to what you said about believing in the decision and believing that you are the subject specialist, there's a reason you're in the room.
Yeah, but I do think a lot of people need to get reminded of that. There is a direct correlation between imposter characteristics and some of the more deeper introversion kind of tendencies as well. It's not an exact science, because you can still be a confident extrovert and still suffer from imposter syndrome from time to time.
Talk to me.
But there's a bit of a correlation there, and I think you're right. It is about the level of self-belief, but it is about putting yourself in situations where it pays off and you go, oh, okay, and that's kind of embedded that information. And I think, just adding that to the other side, which is the conflict side, avoiding conflict does make it sound like you go out of your way to not have tough conversations. Now, don't get me wrong, if you sit down to the anxious side a little bit more, then you probably will avoid, if possible, those conflicting situations. But if we just switch that on its head and go to a model that we use, the radical candor model, and we start to think of it differently, if we get rid of that word conflict for a start and we add conversation in there instead, that does seem different. And it's about the value that you add to the conversation, not about the content of the conversation. So what I would say there is, if you're going to go and have a conversation with someone around something that could improve a process or a relationship or whatever it might be, conflict just needs to be removed from that sentence, because what you're trying to do there is improve conversations or outputs. So I think for a lot of people who are introverts that want to avoid confrontation, is probably a better word, isn't it? It's more about how we can look at that slightly differently and say, you have got a say, you have got a lot of stuff to give to the conversation. How can you do it differently, and how can you see it differently to conflict? Conflict that people go looking for is a problem. Like even people who are okay with conflict are not okay with conflict sometimes.
Yeah, there's healthy levels of conflict.
Yeah, but I would say healthy challenge is probably the better way to look at it. And if you get a little bit more comfortable with that, then it goes without saying that, because the other thing is, because you're more measured, you've got probably more chance of regulating your own emotions, reading other people's emotions. If you're someone who is quite intuitive, you'll pick up on people's changes in their body language, their tone, their email, whatever it might be. And of course, we all need that. The other power of it is that, hey, I'm a doer, right? But people who kind of go more towards introversion and like thinking time tend to be the kind of people that schedule in thinking time and strategy time. They're the type of people who like to plan. Who does not need that, right? If we had an organization with all of us running at things, then we wouldn't have time for all that finer detail. So,
and that's when mistakes.
This is where you step. Yeah, and this is where the introverts step up. You know, this is where people who lead in that way. And this is the other thing that you're absolutely right in what you said earlier. It's like sometimes they won't say as much, but when they do speak, you're like, wow, okay, that's important. So what I thought I would land on was some tips of things I've been talking with my clients about how to step into this space more authentically and to park this idea that you need to be this big, loud, visionary, bold, I'm trying to think of some more words, loud person, because that's not what it takes to get the job done. No. There will be moments when you need to step up, but there's moments where you have to dial into every leadership style. So the first tip that I give people who are kind of more inclined this way is be curious.
Ooh.
Okay? Because you are internally, you're asking questions all the time, which is why you need the space to, you know, I guess unpack it. But if you can dial it into that a little bit more and overlay kind of enter discussions and conversations with people with questions, one, you unlock coaching potential and you empower people. But the other thing is you step right into that conversation. And here's the thing, you sometimes start it and it's like lighting the touch paper and then the discussion starts around you and people go, whoa, you know?
Yeah, Paulo Freire, by the way, being curious, it's his favourite word. He was one of the leaders and pioneers behind pedagogical learning styles.
Yeah.
Go and listen to it and just put it in YouTube. And it is really, I'll probably put one in the link out. We can put one in the link. We'll make a link to it as well to have that information there for you, because that is his favourite word, and it's fully inspired me to be exactly where I am today, Tracy.
Annoying,
needy.
Though I'm curious, but like you can come at things from two angles. You can be curious because you like to know about people, and you can be curious because you want to empower people.
Yeah,
and I think the empowering people bit is the bit I want you to land on is enter a conversation with a purpose.
Definitely.
If you can enter the conversation with a purpose, even if it's just to inspire questions, then straight away as an introvert, you've just given yourself an envelope of you know, influence there. And then what I lined up with that was be provocative.
Wow. Okay.
So enter a meeting, a conversation with something a little bit provocative, you know, something that people might not have considered, or an opinion that's, wow, okay. Now, I'm not saying go in looking for trouble or fights, but think of things that push the envelope a little bit and put it in the room. You know, be the person who's going to speak up. You don't actually then need to lead the whole conversation at that point. You just need to start that conversation with something that really gets people thinking differently.
No, this isn't conversational grenades though, Tracy, is it?
No, this is meaningful interaction. Right,
okay.
Yeah, this is not just chucking an opinion about world politics in the room and now.
Yeah.
No, this is about you really thinking through what you want to get, but the impact that you want to have on that conversation. And along with that, I always put your hand up first. You know, so where you're the last one to speak, be the first one to speak. And you can do that through being provocative or by asking a question. So straight away, you put yourself to the front of the meeting and not the back of the meeting. And you've not had to change much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's sometimes that challenging of that person that does sit in the meetings and goes, and have you got anything to add, Tracy? And you go, nope.
No, so if that's what worries you, it's like when you're waiting to do something. I was watching I'm a Celebrity last night, and I know it was awful. But you know when people are coming out onto the ledge to do that thing where they've got to like hang off that building?
Are they still doing that?
Yes.
Well.
And people were kind of like, and the people who were waiting were worse. You know, they were in a state.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get at here is like, the more you build up, the more you retract. So actually step out first, say the thing, or throw the grenade in the room in a positive way.
Yeah.
And then you've either giving yourself more confidence to expose yourself more, or people remember that you started that conversation. So guess what? There's impact straight away.
Right.
So I think that's, and the other thing as well is when you're stepping into the conversation, you have an added kind of, advantage as someone who is more introverted.
Yeah, it carries more weight, doesn't it?
Yeah, but also you notice body language changes. You can sense a drop in the conversation. You feel when it's the right time to talk, because that's your intuition as someone who sits and looks and thinks. So lean into that. When you see a little bit of a dip in the conversation, jump in, put your hand up, whatever it might be. You don't have to be loudest. You just have to pick your time. Here's the other thing. Do public speaking. Now, most of you who are introverts that are listening to this or watching this now are going, are you having a laugh? Okay. But here's the thing. Even the smallest bit of public speaking gives you automatic credibility. So keep it simple. Practice with the low stakes stuff. Take a slice in a meeting. It could be delivering a small paragraph on something, but push yourself out of your comfort zone.
The final number on a spreadsheet.
Absolutely. But tell a story. Get good at storytelling and make sure that you're succinctly kind of preparing information so you don't get jumbled. Stick with 3 things that you want to land on. Work on your salient points. Think about how your vocal and physical image reflect you. What can you dial up? Are you quite monotone? Can you sort of play with your pitch and stuff a little bit more? Record yourself, watch yourself, be very uncomfortable, and then use it to your advantage. But if there is an opportunity for you to speak, although it's counterintuitive to you, do it, because the more you do it, the more A, you get confidence, and B, other people, you gain their credibility.
I'm just going to call that the James Brown.
Watch yourself. Yeah, okay. The other thing that I've written down here is I talk about walking the halls. Now, for some people who are quite introverted, they may be analytical, they maybe have to go and process information. Sometimes the external observation of that is that you're a little bit of a hermit in your office. You don't really want to talk to people. You don't like humans. That might be true for some of us from time to time. But walking the hall, speaking to people, showing them a little bit of you from time to time will work wonders, okay? Because all of a sudden you've gone from being this person that's kind of processing information and over here to just cracking the door a little bit. Now, for some people, it's very uncomfortable to share all your personal information. It's not something you're comfortable with. It's not even about that. It's about actually just little glimmers of who you are as a person, maybe your humour, maybe some information about what you were doing at the weekend, whatever it might be. You give people just a little bit more, they'll be more likely to enter conversations with you and relax around you. And for that reason, well, you're going to gain in confidence, aren't you? You're going to get that network where they say that you're not naturally wired up for.
Yeah. Just expanding your horizons slightly by opening yourself up a little bit.
Yeah, and creating raving fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing.
Really good. You know what? They're really, really good.
Yeah.
This spoke to me the other week about
as well,
actually,
by the way.
Really funny.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always someone like that, isn't there, in the office? And guess what? They're always the people you go to when you need help as well, because they know stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
Another thing I wrote down was responsiveness equals interest. So I had a conversation with a couple of my clients around this. It's like, if you're someone who's quite process driven, take yourself away from time to time because that's the way you deal with things. Quite often you'll see something coming in and you'll think, yeah, great, check. And you'll carry on. And then the person at the other end of that email or that conversation doesn't feel like they get anything back from you. They think, oh, you're not interested, you don't have your eyes open to what's going on around you. But the reality is you might have just read that, saw that, thought, great, tick in your head. That other person might just need for you to reaffirm that you've read that, you've dealt with it, you saw it, you liked it, you didn't like it, whatever it might be. Sometimes your lack of responsiveness can be seen as the interest level that you have. So if you park something in your inbox for 7 days, don't respond, don't give a reason for it, people think they don't matter or that you're not interested in that. And it's probably not that. You're probably processing it.
Yeah.
Or you thought, they've got it, I don't need to respond. My advice to that is always respond. If it is, I'm not going to be able to get around to this until Wednesday, drop them a message saying, hey, thank you for this. I'm just going to manage your expectations. This is what I need.
Probably going to be Wednesday.
Yes. Someone sends you an information and a bit of information, you think that's nice, but it's not massively important to you. Still respond saying, thanks, got it. People will then see that as you being fully in the picture and not assume that you've taken yourself off into your office and not responsive anymore. And I think for me, these are the key things to really think about in terms of increasing your level of influence. It's not about walking into the room and giving a Winston Churchill speech every Thursday at 1 p.m. Doesn't work like that. Yeah, it's about having a plan, exposing your key characteristics, which are things like reading people, making great decisions, staying calm in the center of a storm. Let's be honest, that's definitely something that we've got to dial into here for tips, is embrace your calm.
Yeah.
You know, in some situations, even the best of us who are doers can get carried away with the tasks and not think about the detail. You've got to embrace your natural instinct, which is actually to be quite organized. Might have to move a bit quicker in some cases, and you'll get better the more you practice that.
Yeah.
But the reality is you're the right person to do the job because you can see the journey. Last thing I put down was solicit feedback.
If you're going to be a hypocrite, then you'll be the person that doesn't ask for feedback.
Yeah, but as an introverted person, it's uncomfortable to speak to people sometimes at the best of times, let alone going, how am I doing? So if you want to increase your presence and you want to increase confidence that people have in you by going to them and saying, hey, how am I doing? How are you doing? How are we doing? What can we do differently? All of a sudden, your influence levels rise and the confidence that people have in you rise because they say, well, actually, you do see things.
And that's
you want to know.
Yeah. So going back to the communication point, that if you are having that conversation, you're opening yourself up to the feedback. They go, oh, they do care.
Yes.
Oh, they are in they're in an environment open to the feedback, rather than going, you know what, the other day, as much as it's going to make me feel a bit awkward, actually, I need to know that information from you, Tracy, because now I'm in a situation where I'm going to do the same thing again. And does that work for us?
Yeah. I do genuinely think that kind of ties into that responsiveness thing. You know, what's the level of interest? And I think the more you can get people to understand that even though you're processing, you might be a little slower or whatever it might be, you are still interested and open to the world.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the biggest way you can increase your presence and your raving fans. People will see you as this, you know, calm in the center of a storm person who can process information. The better you get at it, you process faster. But the reality is that people have confidence that you're curious enough to care and to make changes. But also, you know, it doesn't come across as nosiness. It's actually just curiosity. And actually, it will probably help with your anxiety levels sometimes, because the more you find out about certain situations, the more you feel like you've got information to make decisions.
And
so
that's common.
100%, yeah. So let's flip it. Let's not talk about avoiding conflict. Let's talk about encouraging conversations and encouraging curiosity. Stepping into our authenticity, asking the right questions.
So if it was from an introvert's point of view, and to have that knowledge and have that actual, I'm going to think about the question before I just ask it.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest challenges for you? What are the biggest challenges for you so far that I could maybe help you with?
Yeah.
Where are the areas that you wanted support from me?
Yeah.
How can I provide support from you?
Yeah.
Is there any sort of communication that I need to be involved in as a leader?
Yeah.
So that then maybe I could have the extended outcome, or the outcome that's required. Is there anything that we've missed? From what we've been working together, what now, 18 months now?
Yeah. About that.
Is there something? I think we've had conversations where it's been, well, what are we missing? What's not working?
Yeah.
And how can we then move on and go forward with it?
Yes.
But from an introvert point of view, it could be done as the whisper. It could be done as, right, what are the issues that I'm having, or what are the things that I'm missing from being in your team?
Yeah.
And what can I see as maybe the areas that we can really get some really growth there?
I think just to land on like the last piece on this, I think it could be good to look at this another way as well. I mean, we've used unleashing the power of introverted leadership, which I think is great, but impact and influence are different words. And I think maybe if those of you who are listening or watching now are thinking about, yeah, that's definitely me, maybe harness the word influence a little more. It will make you feel kind of more centered in your natural space, because impact does give that impression of the big bang, that, you know, just, you know, collateral damage and wow, amazing. And actually influence, I think, is a nicer word to sit in, because influence can be delivered in so many different ways, and that's what you're built for. So embrace it, influence.
Okay. So if when we're influencing these people, then Tracy, we've got people that are listening, why don't we just give them the tips, outline front and centre? If you are influencing anybody in your workplaces and having that leadership, and you are feeling a little bit more introvert, these are the T2 tips.
We have already done them. You're going to have to cut 2 of these, are you? Right, hang on. That's okay. Well, should we tie it up and say, what should we say? To be fair, that bit that we just said there about the influence and the impact, you could probably cut that.
I've got plenty of time on that.
All right, okay. So we're going to go with influence, not impact.
We are definitely go with influence.
And I think with that in mind, I think that should give you some food for thought. Dial up your coaching.
Yeah.
Think about the level of influence that you can, show your teams and your peers and the people around you. Step into the conversation and feel confident in your subject matter expertise. And you'll definitely start to see a difference.
Yeah, there's a reason you're in the room.
Absolutely. So great. Thanks for a good chat as always, James.
Tracy, always a pleasure.
And we will see you again soon for another T2 Hubcast.
Hi listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the T2 Hubcast. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform. It only takes a minute and your feedback is greatly appreciated. Reviews help other people find the show and learn about the amazing topics we cover. Additionally, please turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And finally, please subscribe or follow the T2 Hubcast if you haven't already. Doing this means that you'll automatically receive new episodes as soon as they're released. Thanks so much for your support.